The chicken was already in the oven when I heard the front gate creak open. I didn't rush to greet him. I just stood in the kitchen, silent, stirring the sauce on the stove like it mattered. I knew the steps of this night before they happened, like a play I'd memorized but no longer believed in. Tonight was our 9th anniversary. There would be roses, a toast, his speech about how far we'd come, and there would be lies thick in the air like the scent of garlic and rosemary. Eric stepped inside like a man who had nothing to hide. "Smells amazing," he said, kissing my cheek like he hadn't handed over our lake cabin to a 25-year-old woman 3 weeks ago. I smiled. I said thank you. And inside, I watched the entire illusion burn. I'd found the deed purely by accident. A bank alert I never unsubscribed from, tied to the joint account he'd forgotten existed. One click opened a portal I couldn't unsee. There it was. A transfer of property from Eric Grayson to a name I'd never heard before. Sierra Monroe. No explanation. No apology. Just Sierra's name and our cabin. And the date stamped 3 weeks prior. The next 7 days were the longest performance of my life. I said good morning. I packed his lunch. I nodded when he spoke about business and pretended I didn't notice his phone lighting up at odd hours. But I was watching, recording, preparing, and tonight was my finale. I'd invited everyone. His parents, his brother, my sister Emily, even our old neighbors who thought we were the perfect couple. The dining room was dressed in gold and candlelight. A cake waited in the fridge with 9 years strong, piped in blue. And Eric, oblivious as ever, had bought me a necklace I would never wear. He didn't know that inside my closet beneath the winter coats was a slim folder wrapped in ribbon. It contained a printed copy of the property transfer, a notarized certification of authenticity, and screenshots of his messages to Sierra, the ones where he called her my wild escape, and me the cold draft back home. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was ready. Let them toast. Let him beam. Let everyone believe in the dream. For one last night. Because when I handed him that folder, nothing in this house would ever be the same again. Eric raised his glass like a man who thought he was still adored. "To 9 years of love," he said, eyes flicking around the table, gathering approval like applause. To the woman who stood beside me through thick and thin. Everyone clapped. My sister Emily gave me a soft, uncertain smile. She didn't know. Not yet. I nodded, lifted my glass, and drank. The wine was too warm, but it didn't matter. Nothing really mattered anymore. Not the crystal, the roses, the china we only used twice a year. I looked at Eric and saw a stranger in my husband's body. And yet I smiled, just like I was supposed to. Dinner was perfect. Eric made jokes. His brother laughed a little too loud. His mother asked about grandchildren again. I answered politely. I carved the roast. I played the role I'd mastered over nearly a decade. But inside, something had gone quiet. When the plates were cleared and dessert was ready, Eric brought out a small velvet box. "A little something," he said with a wink. Inside was a delicate necklace with 3 diamonds, arranged like a falling star. "Past, present, and future," he whispered. I let him clasp it around my neck. I let him believe it meant something. Then I reached under the table and pulled out the envelope I'd tucked beneath my chair. My voice was calm when I spoke. "I have something for you, too." He blinked. "You do?" I nodded and handed it to him. "Open it." He smiled, expecting a love letter or maybe tickets to somewhere warm. But the moment he unfolded the first page, I saw it. The flicker in his eyes. Confusion. Panic. Then stillness. "What is this?" he asked, too low for the table to hear. "You tell me," I replied. He flipped through the pages. His hand trembled. Across from him, his father noticed the change. "Eric." But Eric didn't answer. He just stared at the photo tucked in the back, the one of Sierra Monroe, standing barefoot on our cabin porch, holding a mug that said, "Property of Eric." Gasps started like a ripple. Emily reached for my arm. His brother leaned forward. Someone whispered, "Is that the girl from his office?" I stood. My chair scraped softly across the wood floor. "Thank you all for coming," I said, still calm. "That's all I wanted." Then I walked out of that perfect little dinner into the cold Ohio night and never looked back. The night air hit me like absolution. Cold, clean, honest. I didn't cry. Not then. Not in the car. Not when I reached the highway or passed the faded sign that read, "Welcome to Cincinnati." I had booked the Airbnb under a fake name 2 days earlier, just in case. But when I reached the door, I didn't walk in. Instead, I turned left and rang the bell of a small blue house with a crooked porch light. Emily opened the door in flannel pajama pants and a sweatshirt that said Tired Moms Club. She looked at me for a long second, then stepped aside. "Tea or tequila?" she asked. "Both," I whispered. We sat in her kitchen until the sky turned gray. I told her everything. About the bank alert. About Sierra. About the cabin we'd built with our own hands, now registered under a stranger's name. About the necklace he'd placed around my neck like a leash. Emily didn't interrupt. Not once. She just poured more tea when my voice faltered and pushed a box of tissues toward me without a word. "You're not staying in that house again," she said when I finished. "You're staying here until you decide what comes next." "I'm not ready to divorce him," I admitted, staring at my hands. "Not yet." She nodded slowly. "Then don't. But don't go back either. Not until you're ready to fight." That was the thing about Emily. She never pushed. She just cleared the battlefield and handed you a sword. The next morning, I bought a fresh legal pad and wrote his name at the top. I made a list. Every transaction I could remember. Every date he came home late. Every business trip that hadn't added up. I dug into old emails, backed up his text history to the cloud, logged into our shared Google Drive and found folders I'd never seen. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was awake. There's a strange clarity that comes after betrayal. The silence stops being heavy. It starts being sharp, and I had every intention of cutting through the lies with it. It started with a message request on Facebook. The profile picture was blurry, just a woman standing by a lake, but the name caught my eye immediately. Maggie Hayes. I hadn't seen her in years. We were classmates in college, lost touch after graduation. I hesitated before opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. Her message was short. "I think we need to talk. It's about Sierra Monroe." My heart clenched. I called her. She picked up on the first ring. "Marissa, I know this is weird, but I saw the cabin photos online. A friend of mine posted them, and I recognized the mugshot of that girl. I knew her. She dated my cousin. She's done this before." I listened in silence as Maggie unraveled a pattern. Sierra had a habit. She'd cozy up to older men, always with money, always married or recently divorced. She'd convince them to make her a business partner, then slowly maneuver them into transferring assets, co-signing documents, or funding projects that didn't exist. Maggie's cousin had almost lost his dental clinic to her. I asked for proof. Maggie didn't hesitate. She sent over screenshots, Sierra in front of another cabin, in Tennessee this time. Same pose, same mug, same smile. She forwarded text exchanges from Maggie's cousin, where Sierra used the same phrases Eric had written to me. "You're the only one who sees me. With you, I can breathe." The words made my skin crawl, but the photo that broke me was one Maggie found from a real estate forum. Sierra and Eric together at a conference 3 months ago. Not in Ohio, in Miami. A trip I didn't even know he'd taken. They were laughing. Her hand was on his chest, and the caption read, "Power Duo, local broker and his rising star assistant." I stared at that photo for an hour. Then I uploaded it to a hidden drive, labeled it Exhibit C, and went to bed without saying a word to Emily. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to a notary in downtown Columbus. A man named Harold Benton. Maggie had recommended him, said he was discreet and thorough. I need verification on these documents, I said, handing over the file. He looked at me carefully. Is this going to court? Eventually, I said, but not before he sees exactly who he tried to play. Harold gave a slow nod, then opened the file and began. I waited 3 more days before texting Eric. Just enough time for the silence to itch. Just long enough for him to wonder if I was crumbling somewhere, mourning the end of our marriage in shame. He replied almost immediately, too eagerly, as if he believed the right words could pull the strings back into place. I miss you. Can we talk? Just us. I typed back at the cabin. Saturday, 6 p.m. He arrived first, of course. The porch light was on. I saw him pacing through the window, fixing his collar, practicing his lines. When I opened the door, his smile was cautious, like a salesman checking if the client still wanted to buy. I brought wine, red, a vintage he used to save for closing deals. He took it from my hand, trying not to look surprised. This place still smells like you, he said, eyes scanning the living room like it was a memory he wanted to salvage. I thought you might never come back. I shrugged and sat on the couch. I wanted to remember what it felt like before it became hers. He flinched. That one word, hers, tore straight through the rehearsed calm. Marissa, it's not what you think. The cabin was just an investment move. Legal protection, tax stuff. Tax stuff with matching mugs. I asked, lifting one from the coffee table. Property of Eric. Before he could answer, the door opened. No knock. No hesitation. Sierra. She paused when she saw me, then smiled. Smug. Sharp. Oh, I didn't know you'd be here. Eric turned pale. Sierra, I told you to wait. Don't worry, I said, standing up. I was just leaving. But before I did, I looked Sierra in the eyes. You really think you're the first? You're just the one who got caught on paper. She tilted her head. Honey, he signed it over. I didn't take anything. No, I said softly. You conned it out of a man too stupid to know he was being played twice. She opened her mouth to respond, but I was already walking. I slipped a flash drive from my coat pocket, set it on the table, and looked at Eric one last time. That's for your records. Or the judges, depending on how you want to handle what comes next. Then I walked out, past the porch where we'd once danced barefoot under the stars, past the flower beds I'd planted myself, and never looked back. Sunday morning was colder than usual, the kind of chill that settles in your bones no matter how many layers you wear. I sat at Emily's kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee, while my laptop screen glowed with folders labeled Exhibit A, Exhibit B, and Recovery Plan. I'd never filed a lawsuit before, but betrayal has a way of turning quiet women into strategists. By 9 a.m., I was on a call with Maggie's cousin, Paul, who confirmed Sierra had nearly cleaned out his practice before vanishing. He gave me copies of their old lease documents, texts she'd sent asking for wiring instructions, even a voicemail where she threatened to expose him if he didn't keep funding her startup. It was all the same playbook, just a different victim. I compiled everything and sent it to Harold Benton, the notary. He reviewed each document, signed off on their authenticity, and directed me to a lawyer in Franklin County who specialized in marital property fraud. His name was Ben Hargrove. He looked like someone who'd lost sleep-winning cases for women like me. I liked that. When I walked into Ben's office Monday afternoon, he didn't ask me how I was doing. He asked me how far I wanted to go. All the way, I said. He nodded. Then let's get to work. Ben moved quickly. Within 48 hours, he'd filed an emergency injunction to freeze the transfer of the Hocking Hills property. The court responded faster than expected. By Thursday, Eric received notice that all assets tied to that address were under review, pending investigation. The look on his face when he got served, according to Emily, who'd driven by to check on the roses, was worth a frame. Sierra, on the other hand, vanished. No social media posts. No calls to Eric's office. No car in the apartment lot he'd been paying for in her name. She disappeared like smoke, leaving behind only her smug little footprints on a porch she no longer owned. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Instead, I sat at my sister's dining room table and wrote a letter to myself. A promise. You will not settle. You will not be made small. You will speak clearly, even when your voice shakes. Then I folded it, placed it in my purse behind my ID, and waited for the next storm. The first smear came from a friend I hadn't heard from in months. A text, polite on the surface, venom underneath. Hey, I heard you're going through a rough patch. Just wanted to say, try not to let bitterness guide you. Eric's always been a good guy. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say to someone who already chose their side. But it didn't stop there. 3 days later, a former coworker forwarded me screenshots from a group chat. Eric was spinning a new story, one where I'd grown paranoid, controlling, emotionally unstable. He claimed I forged the documents, that I'd always been jealous of his success, that I was trying to ruin a good man out of spite. It was textbook, a desperate man trying to frame his downfall as a woman's hysteria. I should have been angry. I wasn't. I was tired of being painted as the villain for refusing to be the victim. Ben, my lawyer, warned me. This is the part where they try to break your credibility. They'll say anything to make you look unreasonable. I nodded. Let them. I'll keep the receipts. But even with my calm, the isolation crept in. Friends I'd once had wine nights with stopped calling. One even canceled brunch, citing bad timing. And when I checked Facebook one night, I saw I'd been quietly unfriended by 2 couples we used to vacation with. Emily noticed. She tried to cheer me up. Let them go, she said. The ones worth keeping won't need convincing. She was right, but I still lay awake that night, wondering how many people only loved me when I was quiet, smiling, married. That's when I decided to write. Not to Eric. Not to anyone I knew. I opened a blank blog page and titled my first post, How to Burn Gracefully. It wasn't rage-filled. It wasn't revenge porn. It was honest, raw. I told the story without names. Just the truth of what it's like to be betrayed by the person who once held your hand through flu seasons and mortgage papers. Within 48 hours, the post had over 10,000 views. Messages started pouring in. Women from Detroit, Tulsa, Albuquerque, all of them writing the same thing in different words. Thank you. I thought I was the only one. And in that flood of strangers, I found something more powerful than sympathy. I found a quiet army. The first time Eric called after the court injunction, I didn't pick up. The second time, I watched the phone ring until it went dark. On the third call, I answered, not because I wanted to hear his voice, but because I wanted to hear him squirm. Marissa, he said, voice low, like we were still partners in something sacred. Can we talk? Please. About what? I asked flatly. They froze the property, the cabin. I just need to understand what you're doing. What I'm doing, I repeated, is protecting myself. From you. He sighed like the victim. You didn't have to go to court. We could have handled this privately. You're making a mess. I laughed. It wasn't kind. You think this is a mess? No, Eric. What you made with that woman in my house, that was the mess. I'm just cleaning it up. He started to say something else, but I hung up. No drama. No goodbye. Just silence. The next day, Sierra's name resurfaced. Someone had forwarded me a link to a Reddit thread. A burner account had posted screenshots of her asking for money through a wellness startup she supposedly co-founded. The comments were brutal. People dissecting her grammar, her filters, her lies. The post blew up, shared across subreddits like wildfire. Someone even made a meme. Her face beside the words spiritual but legally problematic. Eric wasn't mentioned by name, but anyone who knew. By week's end, Eric emailed me. Subject line, can we end this peacefully? I didn't reply, because for the first time, I didn't need anything from him. Not answers, Not closure, not an apology. The court date was set. The lawyer was ready. The evidence was clean and chronological. What surprised me most was what came next. His mother reached out. She called Emily's landline, refused to speak to me directly, of course, and left a message. I don't know what happened to that girl he married, but this version of her, she scares me. I heard the message and smiled, because that's what scared them. That I wasn't begging, that I wasn't breaking, that I wasn't playing the sad little wife who forgives and forgets. No, I was the one writing the ending now, and this wasn't going to be a tragedy. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, from focus. I sat cross-legged on Emily's guest bed, a yellow legal pad in my lap, flipping through every page I'd prepared with Ben. Timelines, financial transfers, real estate filings, photos, witness statements, all of it printed, dated, indexed. But still my hands shook a little. Emily came in quietly, carrying 2 mugs of tea. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just handed me the cup and said, "You don't have to prove you're right. You just have to stand still while the truth does." That helped. What helped more was seeing Eric the next morning. He looked small, unshaven, his usual swagger replaced with a stiffness that didn't suit him. Sierra wasn't there. Of course not. She'd bailed the moment her face hit the internet and the court sent subpoenas. We sat on opposite sides of the mediation table. A legal assistant brought in our files. Ben opened his briefcase calmly, like he'd done this 1,000 times. Eric had someone new, a younger lawyer who tried to smile like this was just a minor disagreement between adults. It wasn't. Ben spoke first. "We're requesting reversal of the fraudulent deed transfer, restoration of marital assets, and full compensation for legal fees." Eric's lawyer scoffed. "There's no proof of fraud. Mr. Grayson had every right to assign that property." Ben didn't flinch. Not when it was co-owned, not when he concealed it from his spouse, and not when the beneficiary has a documented pattern of exploiting older men for financial gain. "Shall we proceed to the affidavit from Mr. Paul Hayes?" They asked for a recess. Eric looked at me then, really looked. Not the way he used to when we were still us, but the way a man looks at a locked door he thought he had the key to. And now he was stuck on the outside. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stared back. Calm. Steady. The woman he underestimated one too many times. When they returned, his lawyer's tone had changed. Softer. Less certain. "We're willing to discuss restitution," he said. "An agreement outside of trial." Ben leaned in slightly. "It's not a negotiation. She's not asking. She's demanding what's legally hers." That was the moment Eric knew he'd lost. Not just the cabin, but the narrative, because for the first time in our entire marriage, I wasn't in his shadow. I was across the table, holding the truth. The official settlement came 2 weeks later. The court reversed the deed transfer, reinstating my ownership of the cabin. Eric was ordered to cover all legal fees, plus damages for misrepresentation and concealment of assets. The cabin was mine, on paper, by law, by choice. I didn't go there immediately. Instead, I stayed at Emily's for a few more nights. Not because I was scared, but because the silence there felt safe, kind, uncharged. When I finally made the drive to Hocking Hills, it was raining. Not the cinematic, thunder-filled storm people imagine in moments like these. Just a quiet drizzle, soft against the windshield. I pulled up to the cabin and sat there for a while, engine off, hands gripping the wheel like I was preparing to enter sacred ground. Inside, it smelled like cedar and dust. No more wine glasses on the table. No more matching mugs. I walked through each room, slowly like I was meeting an old version of myself. The woman who hung curtains, who lit candles, who waited for someone who never really arrived. I opened all the windows and let the air rush in. Then I built a fire, not for warmth, for release. I took the old photos, the anniversary cards, the sweater he left behind, and fed them to the flames one by one. I watched the edges curl, the ink darken, the words disappear. It wasn't revenge. It was a reckoning, a way of saying, this chapter ends here. That night, I slept in the master bedroom alone. And for the first time in years, I didn't dream of erasing things. I dreamed of painting over them. The next morning, I made a list, not of evidence, but of repairs. Fix the porch light, replace the guest bed, repaint the shutters, add shelves for new books. It was no longer a house I shared. It was a place I could rebuild. One plank, one page, one breath at a time. When Emily called to check in, I told her, it's quiet here, but it doesn't feel empty. She paused for a moment before replying, that's because it's yours now, fully. And she was right. The silence was no longer something I endured. It was something I owned. 6 months passed. The leaves turned amber and gold in the hills, and the air carried that crisp promise of autumn. Change, quiet, peace. I stood on the porch of the cabin one morning, cradling a mug of coffee, watching a deer move silently through the trees. The cabin didn't just look different, it felt different. Lighter, like it had exhaled. Inside, the walls were painted pale sage. I'd replaced the old couch with a second-hand leather one, brought in bookshelves, new curtains, and a record player that crackled softly in the evenings. I'd planted herbs in the kitchen window, learned how to make bread from scratch. I wasn't running anymore. I was rooting. Some nights, I still thought about Sierra, where she was if she'd moved on to the next man with a cabin and no spine. I thought about Eric too, whether he'd learned anything, whether he missed control more than he missed love. But the thoughts didn't hurt. They passed like distant cars on a country road. I didn't chase them. I'd gone back to work part-time, consulting for a nonprofit that helped women rebuild their finances after divorce. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest, and it gave me a reason to get out of bed that had nothing to do with survival. Sometimes, I still saw my old name on mail, Marissa Grayson. I didn't hate it, but I didn't wear it either. I was just Marissa now. No attachments. No prefixes. One afternoon, I found the letter I'd written to myself, the one I tucked behind my ID during the worst of it. I unfolded it, reread the lines slowly. You will not settle. You will not be made small. You will speak clearly, even when your voice shakes. I smiled. Then I wrote a new one. You will build without permission. You will love without apology. And you will never again hand over your peace just to be seen as polite. I didn't need to post it anywhere. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's a woman drinking coffee in her own home, surrounded by books she chose, music she loves, and silence that no longer feels like punishment. That's how healing sounds. It's quiet, but it echoes. The first thing I heard was the scream, then the sound of something heavy, ceramic, maybe shattering against pavement. I ran out to the balcony, my heart already pounding. 10 floors below, a small crowd was beginning to gather. Someone was lying face down on the concrete, blood blooming like ink from beneath his head. And then I saw the shirt. That stupid, iron blue shirt Calvin wore every Monday. My husband, my abuser, my so-called provider. My heart didn't sink. It didn't race. It steadied. For the first time in years, I felt calm. I turned back into the apartment. The shattered mug that had just been hurled from the balcony was nowhere in sight, but I didn't need to see it. I knew exactly whose hand had thrown it. Dorothy Quinn, my wheelchair-bound mother-in-law, who'd spent years calling me a lazy freeloader while I changed her diapers and wiped her mouth. She'd meant to hit me. She missed and killed her own son. Funny how karma doesn't knock. It crashes. People say tragedies are sudden, that they come without warning. But this one? It was a slow build, 6 years of servitude, insults, neglect, and quiet rage. Calvin didn't die because of one moment. He died because of every moment. Because of every time he looked at me like I was furniture. Because of every time he said, Teresa, you're just a servant. Be grateful I don't replace you. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I reached for my daughter Eliza's favorite backpack, the one with the butterflies on it, and began packing. This wasn't a tragedy. It was an ending and an opening. 6 months earlier, I'd still been his wife, his caretaker, his obedient housemaid who begged for living expenses like she was asking for charity. But that woman died long before Calvin did. And this is how I finally buried her. 6 months earlier, the only thing I ever owned was a grocery list and maybe the right to ask for permission. Calvin earned the money. Dorothy owned the house. And me? I was the live-in help who just happened to wear a wedding ring. Every month, Calvin would transfer exactly $1,500 into my account. And every month, he acted like he was handing me a trust fund. "You think this is easy money?" he'd sneer. "You don't even work." But I did work. I woke up before anyone else in the house, made breakfast, bathed Dorothy, helped Eliza get dressed for school, and managed a household where every task was either invisible or expected. The worst part wasn't even the labor, it was the asking. Every time I texted him, I rehearsed the words like a teenager asking her dad for movie money. One day, I stood staring at my phone for 15 minutes before I finally typed it. "Hey Calvin, are you free to transfer this month's household expenses?" I got no reply, just silence. That afternoon, Eliza tugged on my shirt at the bakery window, eyes wide and hopeful. "Can we get the pink one, Mommy? Just this once." I knelt beside her and smiled gently, my heart cracking in half. "Let's wait until Daddy sends Mommy some money, okay?" She nodded without fuss, didn't cry, didn't beg, just quietly accepted that cake, the cheapest, smallest thing, was too much to ask for. I tried again. This time I mentioned Eliza. "Calvin, Eliza really wants a little cake today. I don't have the money yet. When you have a minute, could you transfer?" He responded with a voice memo. Irritated, clipped. "Got it. Stop nagging. I'm busy. I'll send it later." He didn't. That evening, I served dinner like always, grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, steamed broccoli. But the tension in my chest made every breath feel like a punishment. We weren't poor. We lived in a 3-story home in Charlotte's quiet suburbs. Calvin wore tailored shirts and Dorothy used imported skincare. But I couldn't even buy my daughter a slice of cake. And I started to wonder, if this wasn't poverty, then what exactly was it? It happened on a Thursday evening. I was halfway through cleaning up the dinner dishes when Eliza clutched her stomach and whimpered. Moments later, she started vomiting, then came the diarrhea. Violent, uncontrollable, terrifying. Her tiny frame trembled as I wrapped her in a blanket and called every rideshare app that would take us to the hospital. We arrived at the ER just after 9 p.m. The nurse took one look at her pale face and ushered us in. But as I stood at the front desk and they asked for insurance and a copay, my stomach dropped. I had exactly $37 in my account, not even enough to pay for her anti-nausea meds. I pulled out my phone and called Calvin. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Didn't I tell you I'm busy?" he snapped. "What the hell is so important now?" "I'm at the hospital," I said quietly. "Eliza's sick. I need money for her meds." "You said you'd transfer." "Jesus, Teresa. Stop acting like some damn debt collector. You're so annoying." Then, click. He hung up. I stood there, frozen. Phone still pressed to my cheek. People moved around me. The nurse called another name. Somewhere a baby was crying. But all I could hear was Calvin's voice echoing in my head. "You're so annoying." I had no choice. I borrowed $200 from an old college friend I hadn't spoken to in years. She didn't ask questions, just sent the transfer. And that, more than anything else, broke me. Not the fact that my daughter was ill, not the emergency, not the humiliation of borrowing. It was that someone I hadn't seen in a decade was kinder to me in 5 minutes than my husband had been in 6 years. Eliza fell asleep in my lap that night, her fever slowly dropping. I watched the heart monitor beep beside her and thought, I used to be someone before this, before diapers that weren't mine, before begging for cash. before being dismissed with a sigh and a voice memo. And in that sterile hospital room, with the beeping of machines and the smell of bleach, something inside me cracked. Not just a feeling, a wall. And once it broke, it never went back up. It wasn't always like this. Calvin used to be charming, thoughtful even. We met at a friend's engagement party. He offered me his coat when it got chilly, complimented my laugh, asked thoughtful questions like he actually listened to the answers. I was working as a medical assistant at the time, renting a small but cozy apartment in uptown Charlotte, dreaming of nursing school. Calvin was a few years ahead of me, career-wise, already climbing the corporate ladder in financial consulting. He spoke about dreams and legacy and building something together. Within 6 months, we were married. And within 6 weeks of that, I was living in his house with Dorothy. That should have been the first red flag. She was already wheelchair-bound after a stroke a few years prior. Her care was expensive, and multiple live-in nurses had quit due to her unpredictable temperament. One evening, Calvin came home and found me massaging Dorothy's legs because her physical therapist had canceled. He looked at me like I was a miracle. "You're amazing," he said. "Honestly, I don't think we need to keep paying someone else when you're already doing such a good job." It didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like a suggestion wrapped in silk. 2 weeks later, he made it official. "Why don't you quit your job?" he said one night as we lay in bed. "You're already doing everything for Mom, and I hate seeing you run yourself ragged. Stay home. I'll take care of everything. You'll have full access to my salary. You'll be the queen of this house." Queen. That was the word he used. So I gave up my job, my income, my independence. At first, he kept his promise. He handed me his paychecks and told me to manage the household. But slowly, so slowly I barely noticed it changed. First, he said he needed part of the money for client dinners, then business trips, then networking expenses. Then 1 month, he stopped handing over his check entirely. "From now on," he said, "I'll just transfer you what you need. No more financial stress for you." But it wasn't relief he was offering. It was control disguised as protection. Dinner that night was tense. I made rosemary chicken with couscous and sautéed spinach, Calvin's favorite, not because I was feeling generous, but because I wanted to prove a point. Even when I was seething, I still showed up. We sat at the table, Calvin, Dorothy, Eliza, and me. Dorothy barely touched her food. Calvin was scrolling on his phone between bites. I cleared my throat. "Calvin, I need the living expenses. You said you'd transfer it yesterday." He didn't even look up. "You women," he muttered, shaking his head. "You think money just appears. I bust my ass all day while you sit here eating food I paid for." I blinked. Eliza went still beside me, her fork halfway to her mouth. Dorothy chimed in, ever the poison-tipped arrow. "Exactly. My son works so hard, and all you do is whine for more money. Maybe if you weren't so lazy, he wouldn't have to do everything alone." I looked down at the napkin in my lap. My fingers were trembling, not from fear, from restraint. I really tried to stay calm. "I budget everything down to the dollar," I said softly. "Groceries, utility bills, your medication, Eliza's school snacks. That $1,500 barely covers it." Calvin slammed his fork down. "Then maybe you should try harder. Stop being greedy. Be thankful I give you anything at all." Something snapped. I stood up, slow and deliberate, and flipped my plate upside down. The chicken slid onto the tablecloth with a wet splatter. "You act like $1,500 makes you a god," I said, my voice low but shaking with rage. "Like I should kiss your feet for giving me scraps, after I gave up my career, my body, and my future to serve this family." I turned to Dorothy, who looked scandalized. "You think you're owed something because you gave birth? No. I've been your nurse, your maid, your therapist, and your cook for 6 damn years, and I've never heard a single thank you." Dorothy opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "Enough. I'm not doing this anymore. No more housework. No more diapers. No more begging for money like a dog. I took Eliza's hand. From now on, Calvin, we parent in shifts. Tomorrow's your turn. And I meant every word. The next morning, I made breakfast for Eliza and myself. Scrambled eggs, toast, and a bit of fruit. I didn't even glance toward Dorothy's room. The sound of her shouting echoed down the hallway, but I didn't move. "Teresa," she screamed. "Are you deaf? Where's my breakfast? I haven't eaten a thing. I could die." I didn't answer, just helped Eliza button her coat. Calvin stumbled out of the bedroom, groggy and annoyed. "What the hell's going on?" I looked at him calmly. "I'm not working today, or tomorrow, or the day after that." He blinked. "You're what?" "You heard me. You called me a servant. So figure out your own damn breakfast. Or better yet, make something for your mother. It's long overdue." He stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Fine," he grumbled. "Let's just not do this in front of Eliza." I turned away and kissed my daughter on the forehead. "Ready to go?" And we left. But I didn't take her to school. At 9:12 a.m., I walked into Calvin's office building and up to the receptionist's desk. "I'm here to drop something off for Mr. Quinn," I said sweetly, gesturing toward Eliza. The woman blinked. I'm sorry. Just let him know his daughter is here. It's his day." 5 minutes later, Calvin emerged, his face a thundercloud. "Are you serious right now?" I folded my arms. "Dead serious. Equal parenting, remember? I took care of her yesterday. Today she's all yours." Eliza tugged on his sleeve and smiled. "Hi, Daddy. Mommy said it's your turn now." His jaw clenched. "Teresa, this is my workplace. I have meetings. I can't just, that's your problem to solve," I said, already walking away. I didn't look back, but I could feel the panic rising behind me. That night, Eliza told me that Daddy was very mad, and that his boss yelled really loud. She didn't understand, but I did. For the first time, Calvin had to carry something, and it broke him within a day. Good. Let him break. It should have ended with that tantrum. But Calvin, being Calvin, managed to make it worse. The next afternoon, as I left an interview at a domestic staffing agency, my phone rang. It was Eliza. Her voice trembled. "Mommy," she sniffled. "Daddy got yelled at by his boss, and then he got mad and told me to wait outside. He said he needed quiet. He said I talked too much." She paused. "There's no one here." "Mommy, I'm scared." My blood ran cold. My 5-year-old was standing outside a glass office building, alone, confused, and terrified because her father couldn't be bothered to do the bare minimum. I found her sitting on the front steps near a potted plant, her little backpack hugged to her chest. She tried to smile when she saw me, but I could tell she'd been crying. I scooped her up and whispered, "You're safe now." But inside I was burning. I called the police. "Yes," I said calmly. "I'd like to report a case of child endangerment. My husband abandoned our daughter outside his office. She's 5. They arrived in minutes. Eliza clung to the kind female officer as I led them to the lobby. Calvin's face turned ghost white when he saw us standing there. Eliza, me, and 2 uniformed officers. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. "I didn't abandon her. She was just being noisy, so I let her have space." The officer's tone was flat. "She's 5. You don't leave a 5-year-old unattended outside a public building." And then I let him have it. In front of everyone, his co-workers, his boss, even the office janitor. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. Dozens of messages flashed. Ignored requests, voice memos laced with contempt, me begging for medicine money. "I gave up my career to take care of his paralyzed mother," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. And when I asked for living expenses, he called me a nag, a freeloader, a servant. Gasps, raised eyebrows. One woman muttered, I knew something was off. Calvin tried to hush me, reached for my arm. I stepped back dramatically, feigning fear. "Please don't hit me." The officer instantly moved between us. Sir, step back. We'll need you to come to the station for questioning. And just like that, the man who once acted like he owned the world stood there humiliated, powerless, and utterly exposed. It was beautiful. After everything, after the screaming, the cops, the accusations, I should have felt exhausted. But I didn't. I felt free. That same evening, I returned to the staffing agency, where I'd left my interview incomplete. The woman at the desk gave me a tired smile. "Rough day?" she asked gently. I just nodded. They'd already reviewed my application. My years of caregiving experience, though unpaid, were more than enough. One agency had already lined me up for a live-in caregiver position. It paid $7,000 a month. The client's mother lost both legs, she explained. Very difficult personality. She's driven off 3 caregivers already. But with your background, I think you can handle her. I almost laughed. Lady, I've been dealing with Dorothy Quinn for 6 years. I wrote the manual on difficult. She smiled. We'll let the client know you're available. If they like your profile, you'll start within a week. As I stepped out into the twilight, a cool breeze brushing my face, I felt something shift. Not just relief, not just hope. It was something deeper, like standing up after years of kneeling. If I was going to do housework anyway, if I was going to wipe mouths and change diapers and endure screams, at least someone would pay me, respect me, treat me like more than a ghost. I got home to find Calvin waiting in the living room, arms crossed. His face was unreadable, but the tension in his jaw said everything. I talked to the officers, he muttered. They said I'll get a formal warning, but no charges. Good for you, I replied, hanging up Eliza's coat. He hesitated, then softened his voice. Teresa, I was stressed. That thing at work. I didn't mean to hurt her. I didn't mean to hurt you. Let's fix this. I didn't even blink. I already fixed it. I got a job. His eyes narrowed. Doing what? You can't even. Caregiving, I said firmly. $7,000 a month. Full respect included. He scoffed. Being a maid? Seriously. I smiled. Better a paid maid than an unpaid slave. And for once, I meant every single word. That night, Calvin tried a different tactic, his last weapon. Money. He came into our room, holding a check. Here, he said stiffly, placing it on the dresser. $3,000. Double what I usually give you. Let's just get things back to normal. I didn't touch it. Teresa, he pressed, you made your point. Okay, you were right. I messed up. Let's move forward. No more delays. No more excuses. I'll transfer everything on the 1st of every month. No questions asked. I looked up from folding Eliza's pajamas. It's not about the money, Calvin. It never was. He gave a tight laugh. Says the woman who begged for cake money last week. My eyes narrowed. You're right. I did beg. And that was the moment I realized I'd rather starve than keep begging. He tried again. I'll give you my full paycheck, okay? Just like before. We'll go back to how it was. No, I said quietly. We won't. Because I've changed. You haven't. He stepped closer, voice low and dangerous. You're seriously walking away from this? From me? You think that job will last forever? You're not young, Teresa. You're not marketable. I laughed sharp and cold. You want to talk about value? For 6 years, I cooked, cleaned, and cared for your mother. That's over 60 months of unpaid labor. If I charged market rates, you'd owe me over $300,000. He clenched his fists. You're being dramatic. No, I whispered. I'm being accurate. Just then, Dorothy's shrill voice rang out from down the hall. Calvin, I need help. My back is killing me. He flinched. I smiled. Sounds like your shift. He scowled, storming out of the room. The check lay on the dresser, untouched. The next morning I packed my things. Eliza's toys. My clothes. the last of my dignity that somehow, miraculously, I'd managed to salvage. And as I zipped the suitcase shut, I felt it again, that steadiness in my chest. Not anger, not pride, just peace. The kind of peace that comes when you finally stop begging for permission to exist. I returned to the house 2 days later to pick up the last of our things, mostly Eliza's books and some photo albums I couldn't leave behind. I thought it would be quiet. Calvin had gone back to work, and Dorothy, well, she couldn't follow me, not on wheels. I was wrong. The moment I stepped inside, she started. So you came crawling back? Finally realized no one else would put up with you. I didn't respond, just headed toward the hallway, ignoring her like she was a radio set to static. That made her louder. You think you're better than us now, huh? Working for strangers, cleaning up their filth? You're still just a maid, a glorified toilet brush. I paused at the balcony door. Eliza had left 2 of her dolls on the table outside. I stepped forward to retrieve them, and that's when I heard it, a guttural shriek, inhuman, hateful, and then the sound of something heavy cutting through the air. I ducked instinctively. The ceramic mug missed me by inches. It flew through the open balcony door and vanished. Silence. Then a scream from below. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs as I ran to the railing and looked down. People were already gathering near the base of the building. One woman was on her phone, hand clamped over her mouth. Another pointed toward something crumpled on the pavement, and then I saw the blue shirt. Calvin's shirt. He was lying face down, blood blooming beneath his head like a dark halo. I stumbled back, bell rising in my throat. Behind me, Dorothy was breathing hard. If you hadn't moved, that was meant for you. She said it like a confession, like a fact. No regret, no horror. You threw it, I whispered. You threw it at me. She rolled forward slowly, face pale but defiant. If he's dead, it's your fault. You were supposed to get hit, not him. I turned toward her, voice shaking with fury. No, you killed him. You killed your own son. She tried to scream back, but I was already grabbing my phone. I had to get down there. I had to call for help. But deep inside, I already knew there would be no saving Calvin. Not this time. The ambulance came quickly, but not quickly enough. Calvin was pronounced dead on arrival. Blunt force trauma to the skull. The mug had struck the exact spot where the bone was weakest. Death had been instant and, in a way, merciful. I didn't cry. Dorothy, on the other hand, wailed like an actress on opening night. My son, my boy, what am I going to do without you? You were everything to me. Her sobs echoed through the hospital corridor, dramatic and shrill. But her grief turned fast, twisting into something uglier. She pointed at me, her eyes bloodshot with rage. This is your fault. You cursed him. You should have died, not him. I didn't flinch. I looked her dead in the eyes and said the words she'd never accept. You threw the mug. Your fingerprints are on it. Calvin is dead because of you. The police came later that night. They took our statements. When they asked Dorothy what happened, she lied, of course. Claimed the mug slipped, that she was just reaching for something and lost control. But the officers knew better. The angle, the force, the witnesses who'd seen the mug fly through the air. It all told a different story. And yet, because of her condition, paralyzed, elderly, they didn't arrest her. No trial. No jail time. Just shame. And that, somehow, felt heavier than handcuffs. Calvin's estate was divided according to the law. I inherited a third. Eliza got another third. The rest went to Dorothy. Of course. I didn't fight her over it. I didn't want the house. I didn't want the things. I just wanted freedom. I signed over my share of the property to her and walked away. Let her rot in that empty, echoing home filled with ghosts and guilt. But I wasn't stupid. I knew what came next. A paralyzed widow with wealth and no allies? She was a magnet for leeches. And, just as I'd predicted, her extended family showed up within weeks. Cousins, nephews, strangers with shared DNA and greedy smiles. She thought she'd won. She thought she could still control the game. But karma? Karma plays long. Years passed. Eliza and I built a new life, small, quiet, unremarkable to the world, but finally ours. I worked steadily as a caregiver. The woman I served, double amputee and all, treated me with more dignity than anyone in my old home ever had. We lived in a modest duplex outside Asheville. Eliza grew, laughed, healed. Then, one spring afternoon, a letter arrived. Dorothy Quinn was dead. I stared the name for a long time. Not because I felt anything. No sadness, no triumph. Just emptiness. A chapter closed. A noise finally silenced. At first, I had no intention of attending her funeral, but then came the call from her lawyer. She left part of the estate to your daughter, he explained. The house in Charlotte. It's in Eliza's name now. I didn't believe it at first, but when I returned to the house, the same one that had once imprisoned me, I learned the truth. Dorothy had grown paranoid near the end. She'd let a nephew from her maternal side move in, made a deal. He'd care for her. She'd leave him everything. But she'd changed the will behind his back. Apparently, the nephew's wife didn't take kindly to Dorothy's personality. Arguments erupted. Disrespect escalated. And unlike Calvin, this nephew didn't coddle. He sided with his wife. Dorothy, bitter and afraid, had one final card left to play: revenge. She gave the house to Eliza, not because she loved her, but because she hated them more. When the nephew tried to contest it, I brought in lawyers. The will held. The house was ours. I sold it the following week. No sentiment, no pause, just cash in the bank and a clean goodbye. People said Dorothy must have had a change of heart, that maybe she saw the light at the end. But I knew better. She didn't give Eliza the house out of love. She did it out of spite. And yet it didn't matter, because the result was the same. In the end, the woman who once called me a servant died unloved, surrounded by vultures. And the woman she tried to destroy walked away with everything. I didn't take revenge. I didn't have to. Life did it for me.